Hey, welcome to the Youth Revival podcast. We're looking at in this season on leading youth ministry online, and as you can see, I've got two people with me. One is Ben Lloyd. Why don't you just give us a wave, Ben? So they know who you are. Ben is one of the youth pastors here at IKON Church and leads our youth ministry in our Chesterfield campus. But I'm also joined and special guest Dan McNab, who is a legend. Leads a great youth ministry, but I'm going to let him explain that to you. So Dan, welcome, and why don't you just share a little bit about yourself?
Nathan, great to be here. I was glad that when you phoned me to say like, let's do this, it kind of felt a little bit like being called up to the England squad. I was like, great, like you got Tando, Sam, Catherine. I was like, oh, it feels like the gang. So my name's Dan. I'm from Kerith Community Church. I'm youth pastor there, running Kerith Youth. Loving it.
No, it's good. It's good. And you're definitely part of the squad. You're doing a great work there in Kerith. And I know during this conversation, for anyone who's listening, there's going to be some gold in it. So great. Dan, why don't you just explain a little bit of what you guys are doing in this season online as Kerith, and maybe something that surprised you in this season?
It's a great question. So with Kerith, I'm hesitant to explain like what we were doing before, but I guess because for us, what we're trying to do now is we're trying to look forward. We're thinking like, well, we want to look forward because that's what's shaping us. We just believe in like, actually there's a real purpose behind this season. Because when we started out going online, we were thinking, oh, this will be a temporary fix. And I guess just with time, we were realizing, oh, actually, no, what we're doing now is actually shaping who we are. This is actually part of our identity as a ministry now. So I'm hesitant to say what we were doing before, but to give you a picture, we're a church on 4 sites. So we've got 4 locations across the country. One of our churches is on the Isle of Wight. So that's banging. I think our pastor just wanted like a holiday home, really. It's by the beach. So that's why we're there. But we run youth across 3 of those sites on Friday nights. So we're figuring our latest site on the Isle of Wight. We're still figuring out youth on Friday nights there. We're just resourcing Sundays. When we went online, we moved to basically a 2-week rhythm. Where on the first week, we run youth live, which that kind of is like a typical live stream. You tune in for a preach and some fun and some goodness like that. So that's kind of like replacing our mass gatherings, youth live. And then the second week of the rhythm, we run our K crews, which are small groups, and they run across the sites, so across the country. So that's where people tune into their crew. It's their kind of people, and it's on their site as well. It's on their church site. So yeah, that's kind of what youth online looks like for us.
Yeah. And has anything like surprised you? Like come out and you thought, oh, I didn't see that coming, or yeah.
It's a great question. That I was avoiding that question when you asked.
Thought you were.
Now, I'll tell you what's interesting. I've learned more about Gen Z than I would have normally. So one piece of research I found out, which just kind of helped me change my mind towards it, is Gen Z. That's who we're reaching, right? That's the generation. For Gen Z, what is fine for them is change. They're totally normal with change. Like that's because if you think about what's influenced that, they've grown up in a world that is vastly changing, massive expansion world that we live in. And mainly technology has influenced the fact that for Gen Z, change is fine. If you think about even our parents, Nath and Ben, like our parents, what they experienced in technology change in like 15 years, Gen Z experienced that in like 12 months. Or maybe even less than that, right? So like their world is constantly changing. So for me, I had to learn quite quickly that actually the massive change that was affecting me like crazy, I'm like down in the dumps and managing like, oh my gosh, everything's in lockdown, I'm locked in my house, all those kind of things. For me, I was managing like stress and those kind of things. But actually for like a year 10 guy, for example, like they were totally fine about this situation. Like their mum has just gone to Tesco, fought off some people, mass bought all the Doritos in Tesco, and now all they're doing is playing Xbox and Doritos for like, that's all they're doing. So actually they're buzzing. But then, so it's because that change is fine for them because they're used to change. So I think that's something that's definitely surprised me, is like Tando, when I was listening to Tando's, when you're speaking with him, he said something gold, which was, don't tell people how they're feeling, ask them. And I think that's so true of this season. That surprised me. I'm like, actually asking people, that's when I found out that actually that everyone's managing this in a different way. And actually, I think Gen Z are actually nailing it. I think they're probably, they're holding it with real strength. So.
Yeah, I think they're the most equipped generation for what we're facing. Because I think it was Tando again said like online is like real life to them. And, there's not been, apart from not going to school, seeing your friends, doing the face-to-face thing, there's not been that big of a difference. But I think what you were saying as well, like they're used to change. Sometimes we can, something, and this is the challenge for a youth ministry and a youth pastor, is to keep things fresh and to keep things moving forward. Have you found you've had to shift things over the last few weeks in terms of going online to keep things fresh, to keep things moving forward?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's been crazy. Something I always speak to my team about youth ministry. Teenagers, they come in through attraction, but they stay in through connection. So we made a decision really early on as a team. We said we're going to really push the connection side of things. So I think this is a great time because there will be a time where I think we will reach more people than we were reaching in our buildings, just because of the internet and how far, we can take our message. But for now, all we're focusing on is connection. We're just doing pastoral care. How's everyone doing? So that's something we've tweaked. And then thinking about Gen Z again, because that's who we're all reaching. If they can deal with change, that's fine. But what they can't deal with is when things don't change. That's when their world starts flipping upside down. And the problem is now we're like 7 weeks in to lockdown. Nothing has changed in their world for 7 weeks. So it's now that teenagers are starting to feel like a sense of their worlds are being flipped upside down. The sun's out, they can't hang out with their mates. Actually, Xbox isn't as attractive as it was 7 weeks ago. Now it's all I've done. So I guess that's something we've jumped on quite. We're just pushing, like, it's now that we're thinking, right, who is it? Because we're in similar churches, us guys, we are a well-resourced church, that we're filled with like counselors, therapists, like you name it. So we're now thinking like, okay, do we need to like do group sessions for some of our older gang as they're starting to process some of their emotions that are coming up? So yeah, I guess that's something we've tweaked. We're really pushing right now for the connection side of youth ministry, because I think a time will come where we do outreach and we'll reach people and stuff. But I think for now, we're just thinking inward, looking after our guys.
No, I love that thought, like attraction and connection. And definitely, I think, I think has been expressed on all of these that have done the connection, the building relationship, that has become key. Pastoral care, all of that. And I love that, even just the thought, like after 7 weeks, it's kind of like nothing's changed. And so for that generation, it's like, well, something's got to change. And so, so I think that's key. The reason, and Ben hasn't said much, and there's a reason for that. The reason I've got both these guys on, because we got a question through the Instagram just around building firm foundations in first year of ministry. And both of these guys recently, so Ben here in Chesterfield, IKON Church Chesterfield, took on Chesterfield with his wife, Hannah. And they've just had a baby boy, Miles. So congratulations, Ben. But they took on over from myself and my wife, Hannah. Not Hannah, that's not my wife, that's Ben's Debbie. So we might do some editing of that, or that can just stay in and be really funny. But yeah, so good. But Dan also took on from a good friend of mine, Liam Parker, who's a great guy. And it's kind of different because I still oversee Ben and Hannah and still make sure they're doing what they're meant to be doing. Whereas Dan, you kind of like, Liam left. He went to plant his own church and went forward. Now he's leading a great church called Flow Church. So Dan, I wondered if you'd just start, and then Ben, you just pick up the conversation in terms of those foundations when you were starting out in that transition. What were some of those strong foundations that you had to build, that you had to begin to, kind of put in the ground and make sure they were there as you led?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, Ben, I'm sure you feel it too. And like Tando as well, good friend of all of ours. We've referred to him a million times already, but we've taken over from Pastor Liam. It was one of those things where you're literally taking over from one of the giants, like one of the youth ministry giants, same with Tando, taking over from Pastor Lawrence. So, and I'm sure Ben, you felt it too. So it's like, damn, these guys have been doing it, and they've been there, done that, led significant ministries and revivals. So I guess for me, I had to embrace, that it's okay to be an echo before you're a microphone. So I guess I learned something that I think Chad Veach said it, that it takes 6 years for you to find your own unique voice. I just think we got to be okay with that. So for a long time, I was just more mimicking what I'd seen, because that's what I knew to have worked. And then when that stuff stopped working, like when the Liam effect wore off, then it's from that space, the gap that's created there, that I started digging into, well, what is the voice that I'm going to bring through that? Like, what is the gap that I'm going to fill between? Because obviously, like the way that Liam did it, God's calling me to now do it in a unique way. And the only way you're going to find that is by just, trying it and seeing what you're passionate about and then figuring it out from there. So I think step one for me was just being okay with the fact that, like, I'm just probably right now, I'm just going to be mimicking like what I'd seen to be done, and then figuring out where are the gaps in that mimicking, where I can bring my own unique gifts and things into that. So
no, really good.
Yeah. Ben, I don't know how you'd feel about that, but
I'd be interested to know who had it easy out of the two of us. Just thinking from a vision point of view, because obviously, Liam had left completely, and you had to. Maybe this is something you could answer, Dan, later. How you formed your own vision for your youth ministry? Because coming into it, I was, coming from being a youth leader for many years and now having to lead the youth ministry in Chesterfield. But I still had Nathan as the oversight, the main youth pastor. So I was following his vision. So I think in that first year, probably one of the main foundations was a personal thing, and that was, okay, Nathan and Debbie have this vision for our youth ministry at church. How can I make that my personal vision as the person who's leading youth in Chesterfield? And then how do I have a vision within that vision? I think that was a really big thing for me in that first year of leading youth ministry. I also think it's sort of when you begin leading your own youth ministry, everything seems to be stripped back, and you discover what are the fundamentals, what are the most important things. Because I think coming from being a youth leader for many years, I guess subconsciously I was thinking, okay, the program's the most important thing. What we're doing on Friday nights, that's the most important thing. But when the guy or girl top leading everything, leading a team of youth leaders, then what you want the most. And what I realized in that first year that I wanted the most was for young people to find Jesus, build relationships, for our youth leaders, our youth leadership team to grow and build disciples for themselves. So yeah, I think, and then from then, you just year after year you're trying to build that into your youth ministry. So I guess that they're the main things I learned in the first year.
Great. Yeah, Dan, why don't you just share, around the vision thing that Ben mentioned, in terms of, building a vision for you, from within yourself. You obviously talk about being an echo, but setting that vision from within yourself. How did you find that, and what process, some of the process you went through for that?
Bro, I mean, it's a great question, and I think just like full honesty, just being candid about it. Vision for me is something I have to dig quite deep for. It's not very natural to me. I'm much more of like a servant, get on and do it, what needs doing. My brain, even a lot more process, boom, boom. Like, can we figure out systems, programs, hit? Like that's what gets me going. Like that's a real. So when it comes to big picture vision, I have to dig quite deep for that. So I guess my first thing would be just know what you're good at. Because for me, naturally, vision isn't it? I'm happy just to do whatever. as long as people were growing. That's all. I'm like, oh, who cares? That's the worst part of me. But then the leader in me goes, well, let's dig deep. You got to create space for what you know is not natural to you. So I think for Liam, man, and I guess there'll be a lot of speaking on his behalf, but Liam, he's a man of vision. He knows exactly what he wants and he knows where he's going. And then he brings people alongside, like he just draws everyone in. For me, that's not so natural to me. For me, like actually, once I can hear a vision, I can then try figure out, well, how are we going to get there? Like that's more my gift. Like how are we going to get there? So I guess for me, I had to create a space of like, well, where are we actually going? Like it doesn't matter if we've got the best delivery of this thing. If we haven't got a good place that we're going, that isn't Jesus centered and isn't bringing people to Jesus and then them growing in Jesus, then actually all the process and systems in the world mean nothing. So yeah, I think for me, I just figured out, what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about the church. I love the church. And what else am I passionate about in youth ministry, especially, is that the church isn't boring. So a lot of our vision was actually born out of what we already were. So because I was a big person, like, who are we? Because that's my big thing. Like, don't really care so much about where we're going, but I really care about who we are. Because of that, basically, our vision was right in front of us of who we wanted to be, because it was already there. We'd already been building it. So really, it was just creating space to dig into God to realize that, and then setting it straight of like, this is who we are, this is where we're going. So for us, our vision is that people will be brought to Jesus by their perspectives changing on church. Because for me, I'm like, I wanted teenagers to walk into the room and go, how is this church? Like, can you hear this music? There's someone over there puking because of some stupid cinnamon challenge game. What is going on? Like that's what I want from my youth ministry, is a place where people's perspective are changed of church and then they're brought to Jesus. Right. So yeah, but that was always in front of us. I just had to create space to dig deep to realize it, because it's not my nature to think vision. So yeah.
I think that's super helpful, Dan, because I guess there would be many people who listen to this, who are watching this, who would be similar in terms of, especially in church life, where, people who kind of step up into, youth ministry a lot are like servants. I'm willing to serve where's needed. And sometimes that's in the youth ministry. And that can be a frustration that's born out. Like, I don't seem to be able to, get a vision because I'm just serving, just creating that space to do that. And actually it being right there in front of you is really key. Ben, I don't know if you got anything to add in terms of the whole, kind of transition stuff and just leading out of that vision.
I think probably one of the hardest things to discover and to learn is, how do you communicate that vision to your team, especially another question maybe we could throw to Dan after this is how the youth leadership team changed through that transition, because the team that me and Hannah inherited was a team of guys and girls who were under Nathan and Debbie's leadership for a long time. So it was like them having new voices, a new vision in a way coming from me and Hannah. So it was just, I guess, learning how to communicate that the best. And obviously, for some of us more than others, those youth leadership teams changed. Ours has changed a lot over several years. It wasn't a very drastic, a load of people left and then a load of new people came in. It's that sort of has happened, but it's happened over a long time. But there are, there's still amazing youth leaders on our team that were youth leaders when Nathan and Debbie were leading the youth ministry in Chesterfield. But over years, have figured out a way of how do we get those guys who were so used to Nathan and Debbie side and fully bought into mine and Hannah's vision. So I don't know if Dan wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, Dan, did all of Liam's leaders leave? Did they go? Did you kick them out? What happened?
It was ugly. I'm kidding. Well, actually, our transition was quite drastic. It was because I guess Liam had risen up all these leaders, but I mean, that's really what it was. They were Liam's leaders. So when it was time for him to plant a church, I mean, they were sold out to his vision. And you know, as Kerith, we stood and we blessed it and we said, yes, we agree. Like, we believe this is what God's saying and calling you guys to. And I think it was a blessing in disguise, but the reality was we lost the entire youth team pretty much quite drastically. And it wasn't like overnight. It wasn't that drastic, but it was drastic enough to where what we had and what was sustained by leaders that had higher capacity. When me, brand new, and my team tried to sustain that, it wasn't sustainable for us. And it was that really started pushing us into what is it that we want to do? Because what we're doing, we can't sustain because it's killing us. We're exhausted. And I'm sure, like, any team of mine who are listening, they remember those days because they were rough, right? We had some really rough Friday night, we are not ready for this, you know? And I definitely had moments where I was like, honestly, who put me in charge? Like, why am I in charge of this thing, you know? And I guess it was actually some really painful times, that some of the transition after we'd lost kind of our original core team. But it was out of that pain that God birthed some really, really epic leaders, vision, strength. You know, it was out of that pain that God really used to build us. And now we're in a real place of strength, but we're only in a place of strength now because we went through some really difficult times, just growing pains and capacity changes and all those kind of things. So yeah, it was a little bit more drastic. But why I say it's a blessing in disguise is because the leaders who went with Liam for Flow Church Plant, I mean, they're some of my closest friends, and it's difficult to lead your closest friends because there's just so many blurred lines there. So for me, I got a team who was sold out to me, you know, and they were under my leadership, under my vision. I've been incredibly blessed by that. So yeah, I guess that's why that's a blessing. But it was definitely quite drastic. Yeah,
that's quite a good thing to think about, because I think a lot of people who are starting out in youth ministry would think, I'll get my friends to help me with this, which can be a good thing. But like you said, there are blurred lines, especially I think when there's been another leader in place. I know for Ben and Hannah, you felt that kind of initially, but I guess you've journeyed that out with some of those guys. What would be some of the keys kind of like over the journey of journeying that out with some of the guys who you would say are your closest friends? How have you journeyed that out, and what would be some of the things that have helped you do that?
I'll kick off with this one. I think time, you need time, takes years to do it, and you need to be persistent. And I think, especially with friends, in terms of communicating the vision and getting them on board, and, you know, them not just, obviously you're still going to be friends with these people, but they need to start treating you like a leader. They need to follow what you want to do, what you're telling them to do, what you're saying. And I think, you know, when we think of communicating vision, the first thing we think of is standing up in front of the team, or standing up on a Friday night and communicating that from stage, which, you know, is massively important. You know, we need to keep doing that as much as we can. But I think it's in the asking them to do things, it's also the explaining why this is important as well. So I think one of my best friends, George, who, Dan, I think you will know George Heeks, who's been part of our youth ministry for donkey's years. Like, I remember bringing him to youth when we were in like year 8 or year 9, and George got saved in our youth ministry. He's basically stuck around ever since and has been a youth leader for a long time. But he's still on our youth leaders team, and he's been able to come under my leadership over the past few years, even though we've been friends going back to early secondary school. But the great thing about my relationship with George is that I've been able to ask him to do things, but also explain why these things are important to him. And he's been able to catch that every single time, which has been really helpful. So I guess my encouragement for leaders who are trying to lead their friends, it's so important to just give them the why behind everything as much as you can. Like, you don't want to just be very task orientated and just getting them to do things, because that will create tension, I think, within the friendship. But if your friends a friend wants to know your heart. So if you keep giving them your heart every time you're asking them to do things or communicating the vision like we've been talking about, I think that is so important and will help that journey a lot, I think.
Yeah, great. No, some great thoughts there. And yeah, so good. Dan, you mentioned obviously you found out like the who we are, the vision. Just flipping back to youth ministry online a little bit. And I know for us, we talked about the attraction and connection thing, and connection being a big part, of who you are. But how have you helped sustain the kind of the vision? This is who we are. This is what we're believing for. How have you sustained that over the last 7 weeks of youth online? And so even just dropping a couple of the practical things that you might have done to help sustain that.
Real. Great question. First thing I did was made a brand new group chat because I had leaders across 3 different parts of the South, right? We've got 3 different sites, and actually they're relatively close together, but still leaders leading in places independently of each other. I realized, we're all going to be in one place. We're all going to be online. This is an opportunity for us to be one team. So we all came together, and we've met every week since then online as a team. And it's only now that things are getting normal that we're going to move that to bi-weekly, because we want to just make that time valuable. So why did I do that? Well, I did that because if something's not being modeled by the leaders, no teenagers are going to be doing it. And, I really wanted group chats to be, because we have a ton of K-Crew group chats. I wanted group chats to be alive. I wanted people to be tuning into live streams, engaging with our Instagram, and actually, if it wasn't for my leaders driving those things forward, I mean, we'd be dead in the ground. So practically I met with my leaders every week, and that has grown us. It's so amazing to see, like, actually as a team, we've really come together. We've been there for each other. One of the highlights of my week is when we all gather together. So yeah, I mean, that was one of my practical things to drive the vision forward, because actually it's a reminder. We talk about a lot of practical things. I mean, it's a reminder that actually this is what we're doing.
Right.
Ben, I don't know if you'd have any practical things, but
I think that's so interesting that the whole one church, one team. I think you look across a lot of churches and the exact same things happened. With our youth ministry. It has, we've always worked together across campuses in terms of the youth ministry, but it has brought us closer through this than we've ever been as a team before, which is really amazing. And I think just in terms of, getting across the who we want to be, why we do what we do to our young people. I think it's been a great season for that, because we've stripped right back, really. And I think, Dan, you kind of talked about this earlier, but we have gone back to making it about contacting young people and building relationships. That's what, ultimately what the message to our youth leaders team has been refined to over the past few weeks. Is this is a season to build relationships with your young people, with your small groups. And the vision, I guess, we've communicated to our team is, by the end of this, when we go back to whatever life is going to be beyond this, imagine if our relationships with our young people is the strongest, the closest they've ever been. So yeah, I think it's been a really great time for that.
Mm-hmm. And I just think like what we were talking about before, like for me, my personality, this is why, like, leaders, you got to be so in touch with who you are. Like, what is it that's easy for you? What is it that's difficult for you? For me, I'm like, I've got to dig deep for vision. So I've got to be like, I guess for me, it goes back to leading myself, because it's when I'm strongest in myself that then I go to the places that I'm like weakest with. So if I know, for me, naturally driving vision isn't the strength. So if I'm knackered, if I haven't taken care of myself, then it's the last thing I want to do is like drive forward vision, so I guess like massive thing is like leading yourself in a place of strength, especially in a time like this. You just got to be kind to yourself. I learned, like, for me, there's 3 things where I check myself for leading myself. The first thing is realizing that we're like whole beings. So we're a physical being. So I always check myself for diet and how much water I'm drinking, how much sleep I'm getting. And at the moment it sucks, honestly. Like, my sleep's okay, but my diet is terrible. Honestly, I'm a mess.
You can't say your sleep sucks when Ben's just had a new baby.
Okay, no, my sleep's okay. I'm sorry, Ben. I'm bragging. Yeah, but I mean, my physical being, you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your spiritual being. So take care of your spirit. You're digging into the word every day. Because if you're a leader of a ministry and you're not digging into the word every day, you're gonna struggle. You got no longevity. You know, you'll be able to take things as far as you can take it. So you got to dig into the word every day. And then thirdly, this is what in the church we always overlook, and it's what I got a bit of beef with, is we're emotional beings. We never go into the fact that we're emotional beings. We have to be engaging with, like, how do I feel towards everything that's going on right now? You know, how do I feel towards the world? Am I angry? Am I upset? Am I heartbroken? Am I numb? Do I feel nothing? You know, we've got to engage with our emotions, because if you engage with those things, there's a way of engaging with your emotions without letting them lead you. And like, you know, you can, I understand, like, don't be led by your feelings. Our hearts are corrupt. I agree with all of that teaching, but you've got to validate and experience the feelings that you're feeling, because that's part of leading yourself. So yeah, I mean, you got to engage with how you feel towards something. So something we didn't talk about was like our year 11s, for example. That's created deep sadness in me, because they're experiencing loss, like loss of not having that last day of school where you get your yearbook signed and your t-shirt signed. That's been taken away from them. Their prom has been taken away from them. That's loss. That's deeply sad. That's one of the highlights of year 11. That sense of euphoria has been taken away. You know, when you finish your exams, it's like the best feeling ever. And you got that sense of like, you've accomplished so much and you don't even care what your grades are. You're just so excited that you get to go to McDonald's and celebrate with your mates. Like, all of that's been robbed from them. They've lost that. They're experiencing deep loss. So for me, that stirs up deep sadness in me. And I've got to be able to engage with that, because it's part of me leading myself well. So yeah, I mean, we're emotional beings as much as we are spiritual beings, as much as we are physical beings. So I guess when it comes to driving vision forward for me, I've got to be engaging with those three aspects of my life, because if I'm not, then I'm not the best version of myself, which means the last thing I want to do is push forward vision, you know? So.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Go on, mate.
Well, I was just thinking, for where I can't engage with those things and when I'm low in those places, like if I just had a baby and I'm not sleeping, God fills that gap. So where I fall short in those things, like when I don't know what I'm feeling, or if my emotions are just spiked, or if like I'm not digging into the word every day because I'm human, like God does the rest. So I guess, yeah, that's how I lead myself.
Yeah, there's grace, isn't there? There's grace for seasons, and there's grace in situations. I love that even in our weakness, you know, he is strong, and so that's good. But I loved your thought around the emotions, really. I like to say it like this: feelings can be a great indicator. They can indicate where we're at, you know, where we're at emotionally, but they're not a great captain. So don't let them lead your life, but let them indicate, this is where I'm at. So I need to be working through this. I need to be working through this. One of the things that I stress to our youth leaders was just around being healthy and being the healthiest selves. Because if we're healthy, we're able to lead healthy. And so good. Well, thanks, guys. And I think we'll definitely get you both back on very soon to talk around these things. Some great thoughts, but thanks a lot, and thanks to everyone watching, and hope this has really helped you move forward. But Dan, big thank you for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you very soon.